What's up guys, Brian here for Animated Muscle and Performance. Welcome back to another video. Today's topic is going to be macros and why they're so important. Now, I mentioned macros briefly in my last video, but I think you can expand on that and go into a little bit more detail. So if you're unsure what macros even are and why they're important, stick around, we're going to break it down for you. Okay, so macro is going to be short for macronutrient. These are going to be your carbs, your fats, and your proteins. There's going to be 9 calories per gram of fat and 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate and protein. So already from a profile standpoint, you can see why a lot of times when looking at people's macros, the fat is going to be a lot lower in comparison to the carbs or the protein. And it isn't because fats are bad, it's just because they're more calorically dense. So having your fats too high may put you over the threshold of total calories that you need to hit your goal. So again, none of these are bad things. Carbs aren't bad, fats aren't bad, obviously proteins are not bad. They're all kind of important and they play their own role in your fitness goals. Carbohydrates go a long way in terms of performance in the gym. A lot of times when people are dieting down and have physique-oriented goals, it's accompanied by some sort of workout routine. So carbohydrates go a long way in fueling your workouts. Protein obviously goes a long way in building muscle, and fat is very good for hormone levels, keeping your hormones intact and where they need to be. So each of the macronutrients has a role to play, and I think it's an important part of dieting down is having a good healthy split of these macronutrients. All right, so now you know a little bit more about macros, but why are they important to track? To me, this is in my opinion, I think a lot of times we get caught up in what we're eating and not so much how much we're eating. A lot of times when you see people start a new diet, they'll bust out the salads for a month or so in an attempt to be eating cleaner. And I think this is a mistake because it's not so much what you're eating, it's how much of it you're eating. And tracking your macros is going to give you a more accurate chokehold on your caloric intake. You have numbers, and this leads me into my next point, which is that many times, at least where I'm from, growing up here in America, it might be different in other parts of the world, but growing up here, a lot of times we don't quantify food. The only thing, as I think back on my childhood, the only way I knew when to stop eating or if I had had enough, or the only real measuring tool that I had when it came to food was my appetite. And, I think for a lot of people, this is, the case, this is the scenario, and you can begin to see why a lot of people run into problems later on in life as you get older, as you become more sedentary, you're moving less. You can see how the weight can start to build up. So I think that quantifying food is a huge, huge benefit in terms of tracking your macros. I think it goes a long way in just getting a chokehold on your caloric intake so that you know if you need to eat less or if you need to eat more. For instance, if you start out with a macro range and you do that for a week and your weight stays the same, you kind of know that you're at your maintenance level of calories. You're in a good kind of holding pattern to stay where you're at. So you then know if you want to gain weight, you're gonna have to take those numbers and you're gonna have to up them a little bit, right? And if you're gonna diet down and lose weight, you're probably gonna have to take those numbers down. A lot of times I like to think of macros almost like having your hand on a volume dial. And if you want the music to turn up, you've gotta turn that dial up, and if you want the music to go down, you've got to turn it down. Macros are like that dial in the sense that you just got to manipulate the numbers up or down depending on what your goal is. All right, so in a nutshell, your macros are just your carbs, your fats, and your proteins, and it's an extremely powerful tool, in my opinion anyways, because it gives you a way to quantify your food. It gives you an additional layer of accuracy, and it lets you know where you really stand when it comes to food, and it lets you know what you need to do next. If you aren't reaching your goals, at the rate that you want to, you can then manipulate the numbers up and down. It's an extremely useful tool, tracking your macros. And as I mentioned in my last video, there's also another layer of flexibility that can be incorporated into tracking your macros that really just sets you up for success. And that's really all I'm trying to break down in some of these videos, is to shed light on the aspects of dieting that I found over the years of competing as a competitive bodybuilder, as well as somebody who's just enjoyed working out since I was 15 years old. So I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you're interested in any coaching or personal training, I will leave my information in the description. Reach out. And I will see you guys in the next one.